Chapter 11, continued. McCall's hand reached out and gripped Anset's.
How was I to know, Anset? How was I to know that now, in my dotage, I'd do the foolish thing I've avoided all my life? Oh, I've loved like I've done every other passionate thing, but when they took you, I discovered, my son, that I need you.
McCall rolled over and looked at Anset, who was gazing at the old man adoringly.
Don't worship me, boy, McCall said. I'm an old bastard who'd killed his mother if one of my enemies hadn't already done it.
You'd never harm me.
I harm everything I love.
His face relaxed from bitterness into the memory of fear.
We were afraid for you. At first we were afraid you were another victim of this madman who'd been terrorizing the citizens. The audacity of it was incredible. I expected to learn they'd found your body torn to pieces.
His voice broke.
But then we didn't, and we kept finding more and more bodies, but none of them was yours. We had to fingerprint some, or use their teeth, but none of them was you, and we realized that whoever had taken you had picked his time well. We had wasted weeks trying to fit you in with the other kidnappings, and by the time we realized that was all wrong, the trail was cold. There were no ransom notes, nothing. I lay awake at night, hours on end, wondering what they were doing to you.
I'm all right.
You're still afraid of them.
Not of them, Anset said. Of me. McCall sighed and turned away.
I've let myself need you, and now the worst thing anyone can do to me is take you away. I've grown weak.
And so Anset sang to him of weakness, but in his song, the weakness was the greatest strength of all. Late in the night, when Anset had thought McCall was drifting off to sleep, the old emperor flung out his hand and cried in fury, I'm losing it!
What? Asked Anset. My empire. Did I build it to fall? Did I burn over 12 worlds and ravage 100 others just to have the whole thing fall in chaos when I die?
He leaned close to Anset and whispered to him, their eyes only centimeters apart. They call me McCall the Terrible, but I built it all so it would stand like an umbrella over the galaxy. They have it now, peace and prosperity, and as much freedom as their little minds can cope with. But when I die, they'll throw it all away. Anset tried to sing to him of hope.
There's no hope. I have 50 sons, 3 of them legitimate, all of them fools who tried to flatter me. They couldn't keep the empire for a week, not all of them, not any of them. There's not a man I've met in all my life who could control what I've built in my lifetime. When I die, it all dies with me.
And McCall sank to the floor, wearily. For once, Anset did not sing. He reached out to touch McCall, rested his hand on the old man's knee, said, For you, Father McCall, I'll grow up to be strong. Your empire will not fall. He spoke so intensely that both he and McCall, after a moment's surprise, had to laugh.
It's true, though,
McCall said, tousling Anset's hair.
For you, I'd do it. I'd give you the empire. Except they'd kill you. And even if I lived long enough to train you to be a ruler of men, to put you on the throne and force them to accept you, I wouldn't do it. The man who will be my heir must be cruel and vicious and sly and wise, completely selfish and ambitious, contemptuous of all other people. Brilliant in battle, able to outguess and outmaneuver every enemy, and strong enough inside himself to live utterly alone all his life.
McCall smiled.
Even I don't fit my list of qualifications, because now I'm not alone.
Neither, said Anset, am I. And he sang Father McCall to sleep. And as he lay in the darkness, Anset wondered what it would be like to be emperor, to speak and have his words obeyed, not just by those close enough to hear, but by billions of people all over the universe. He imagined great crowds of people moving to his song, and worlds moving in their paths around the suns, according to his word, and the very stars moving left or right, near or far, as he wished it. His imaginings became dreams as he drifted off to sleep, and he felt the exhilaration of power as if he were flying, the whole of Susquehanna spread below him, but at night, with lights shining like stars. Beside him, someone else was flying. The face was familiar, but he did not remember why. The man was tall and in a sergeant's uniform. He looked at Anset placidly, but then reached out and touched Anset, and suddenly Anset was naked and alone and afraid, and the man was fondling his crotch, and Ansett didn't like it, and struck out at the man, struck out with all the power of an emperor, and the sergeant fell from the air with a look of terror. Fell, and was smashed on one of the towers of the palace. Ansett stared at the broken body, the crumpled, bleeding body, and he suddenly felt the terrible weight of responsibility. He looked up, and all the stars were falling, all the worlds were plunging into their suns, all the crowds were marching over a huge and terrible cliff, and however much he wept and cried out for them to stop, they would not listen, until his own screaming woke him up, and he saw McCall's kind face, looking at him with concern. "A dream," Ansett said, not really awake. "I don't want to be emperor." "Don't be," McCall answered. "Don't ever be." It was dark, and Ansett slept again quickly. Chapter 12. If the freemen of Air had not been guilty, would they have fired on the first Imperial troops to come questioning them at their supposedly secret base in Antrim? Some said not, but the Chamberlain said, "It's too stupid to believe." The captain of the guard held his temper. It all fit. The accent pinpointed them to Antrim. 17 members of the group had been in East America for one reason or another during most or all of the time Ansett was kidnapped, and they opened fire the moment they saw the troops. There isn't a nationalist group that wouldn't have opened fire. There are too many nationalist groups that haven't. Too convenient, I think, the Chamberlain insisted, not looking at McCall, because he had long since learned that looking at McCall did not help at all to persuade him. Every damn one of the free men of Air were killed. Every one. They started killing themselves when they saw they would lose, and I think that Ansett is still a danger to McCall. I found the conspiracy and destroyed it. And then silence, as McCall considered. Has Ansett been able to recognize any of the men you killed? The captain turned a little red in the face. There was a fire. Few of the bodies were recognizable. I showed him pictures, and he thinks that 2 or 3 might have been, scoffed the Chamberlain. Might very well have been members of the crew on the ship. I did the best I could. I command fleets, damn it, not small mop-up crews. McCall looked at him coldly. Then, Captain, you should have let someone command who knew what he was doing. I wanted to make sure there weren't any mistakes. Neither McCall nor the Chamberlain needed to say anything to that. What's done is done, said the Chamberlain, but I don't think we ought to get complacent. The enemy was clever enough to get Ansett in the first place, and keep him for 5 months where we couldn't find him. I suppose that even if some or all of the crew were freemen of Air, the conspiracy didn't originate with them. They were too easy to find, from the accent. Remember, the kidnapper was able to hide every single day from Ansett's memory, and our best probing. If he hadn't wanted us to find the freemen, he would have blocked those memories too. The captain was not one to cling to defeated arguments. You're exactly right. I was taken in. So were we all, at one time or another, McCall said, which did much to ease the captain's discomfort. You may leave, McCall told him, and the captain bowed his head and got up and left. The Chamberlain was alone with McCall in the meeting room, except for the 3 trusted guards who watched every movement. I'm concerned, said McCall. And so am I. No doubt. I'm worried because the captain is not a stupid man, and he has been behaving stupidly. I assumed you've been having men follow him ever since he was appointed. The Chamberlain tried to protest. If you hadn't been following him, you haven't been doing a very good job. I've been having him followed. Get the records and correlate them with Ansett's kidnapping. See what you find. The Chamberlain nodded, waited a moment, and then, when McCall seemed to have lost interest in him, got up and left. When McCall was alone, except for the guards, but he had learned to dismiss them from his mind, except for the constant watch against an unwary word. He sighed, stretched his arms, heard his joints pop. His joints had never popped until he was over 100 years old. Where's Ansett? He asked, and one of the guards answered, I'll get him. Don't get him. Tell me where he is. And the guard cocked his head, listening to his constant stream of reports coming into his ear implant. In the garden, with 3 guards, near the river. Take me to him. The guards tried not to betray their surprise. McCall hadn't gone outside the palace in years, but they moved efficiently, and with 5 guards and an unseen 100 more patrolling the garden, McCall left the palace and walked to where Ansett sat on the riverbank. Ansett arose when he saw McCall coming, and they sat together, the guards many meters off, watching carefully, as Imperial flits passed overhead. I feel like an invader, McCall said.
I have to take 2 guards with me when I take a shit.
The birds of earth sing beautiful songs, Ansett answered. Listen. Mikal listened for a while, but his ear was not so finely tuned as Ansett's, and he grew impatient.
There are plots within plots, Mikal said. Sing to me of the plans and plots of foolish men.
So Ansett sang to him a story he had heard only a few days before from a biochemist working in poison control. It was about an ancient researcher who had finally succeeded in crossing a pig with a chicken so that the creature could lay ham and eggs together, saving a great deal of time at breakfast. The animals laid plenty of eggs, and they were all the researcher had hoped they'd be. The trouble was, the eggs didn't hatch, so the animals couldn't reproduce. The blunt-snouted pickens, or chigs, couldn't break the eggs, and so the experiment failed. Mikal was amused and felt much better.
But you know, Ansett, there was a solution. You should have taught them to screw out with their tails.
But Mikal's face grew sour again, and he said,
My days are numbered, Ansett. Sing to me of numbered days.
For all his attempts, Ansett had never understood mortality in the way the old understand it, so he had to sing Mikal's own feelings on the matter back to him. They were no comfort at all, but at least Mikal thought that he was understood, and he felt better as he lay in the grass, watching the Susquehanna rush by.
I do the foolish thing I've avoided all my life. Oh, I've loved like I've done every other passionate thing, but when they took you, I discovered, my son, that I need you.
Mikal rolled over and looked at Ansett, who was gazing at the old man adoringly.
Don't worship me, boy, Mikal said. I'm an old bastard who'd killed his mother if one of my enemies hadn't already done it.
You'd never harm me.
I harm every of their teeth, but none of them was you, and we realized that whoever had taken you had picked his time well. We had wasted weeks trying to fit you in with the other kidnappings, and by the time we realized that was all wrong, the trail was cold. There were no ransom notes, nothing. I lay awake at night, hours on end, wondering what they were doing to you.
I'm all right.
You're still afraid of them.
Not of them, Ansett said. Of me. Mikal sighed and turned away.
I've let myself need you, and now the worst thing anyone can do to me is take you away. I've grown weak.
And so Ansett sang to him of weakness, but in his song, the weakness was the greatest strength of all. Late in the night, when Ansett had thought Mikal was drifting off to sleep, the old emperor flung out his hand and cried in fury,
I'm losing it!
Chapter 11, continued. Mikal's hand reached out and gripped Ansett's.
How was I to know, Ansett? How was I to know that now, in my dotage, thing I love?
His face relaxed from bitterness into the memory of fear.
We were afraid for you. At first we were afraid you were another victim of this madman who'd been terrorizing the citizens. The audacity of it was incredible. I expected to learn they'd found your body torn to pieces.
His voice broke.
But then we didn't, and we kept finding more and more bodies, but none of them was yours. We had to fingerprint some, or use